The transgender athlete debate has been fueled by a transgender athlete being permitted to compete in the Olympics for the first time. Transgender athletes exist in all sports, including cricket. We're not here to debate it, we are here to learn and discuss. We discuss the possibility, the implications, and the science around this. All that next. Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Offside Maidens with our incredible panel. I'm your host, Tara Lee, and we have Alicia, resident cricket player and juicer, the twins, avid watchers of the game, future umpires, no doubt. And they also write about the game and are huge cricket fanatics. Welcome, ladies. A very interesting topic tonight. How have you been? All of you looking cozy. Leisha's even drinking her juice out of a mug today.
No, it's not. It's too cold for juice. It's just coffee, Tara. It's just coffee.
We'll take your
I've
word
been
for it.
good. I've been good. It's been a minute since I've seen y'all, but yeah, I've been good. I'm irritated that gyms are closed, but I understand why. But yeah, I can't wait to get back to the gym though, and I can't wait for today's topic either.
And twins, how have you been in this time since we've seen you?
Well, we've been keeping ourselves warm, and like Alicia said, it's really, really cold for juice, so we're all just having like our warm beverages. But yeah, we've been at home and registered the parents for the vaccine, so they're so relaxed. They're like, oh, the vaccine, oh, okay. I'm like, no, you don't get this. Yeah, so we just had to do that for them, and yeah, it does. It's been a while.
I've also taken my mom to get the vaccine. She
Yeah,
has actually had the second jab already. So she's currently fully vaccinated. At least in a week's time, I think it will be 97% effective.
Mm.
So
I'm gonna guilt trip them, be like, yeah, my friend's parents already have their second jab, so I'm gonna guilt trip them.
sometimes we have to do that. So we are discussing a very interesting topic. It has been divisive. Different people have different opinions. We're not going to give too much of our opinion. We want to hear more of an educated opinion. And we do have somebody joining us this evening, a very special guest. His name is Shane Jabaar. He is a physiotherapist. Good evening.
Hi, Tara. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Also, thanks to you because he has been helping me through my injuries as well. Just to give us a quick rundown on what it is that you do.
I'm basically a sports physiotherapist. I specialize in sports injuries. It doesn't mean I don't see, other people with other sort of injuries requiring physiotherapy, but I specifically focus on sports injuries. And that's been my career so far.
And we are bringing you on here to talk about this topic. But before I jump into the topic, I do want to remind you that the views and opinions are that of the individual sharing it and not that of Cricket Fanatics or even the whole panel. So just keep that in mind in the comment section. So, transgender individuals are those whose gender identity, how they identify, is different from the sex designated to them at birth, whether they are pre or post puberty, and whether or not they have undergone any form of medical intervention. And there's been a whole debate about significant advantages in size, strength, power. And the Olympics has a very specific criteria that you have to fulfill. World Athletics requires you to have, or rather, her to have serum testosterone at a concentration of less than 5 nanomoles per liter. And for women who are identifying as men, they just have to put in a written request. So there's no hormonal requirements for women so far who are now becoming men, or rather women born biologically as women who are identifying as men. So, Shane, do you know what effect would lowering testosterone levels actually have on a biological male in terms of performance?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you know, testosterone is the primary male hormone, responsible for giving us our sort of our label as being male, our maleness, if you like. And so reducing testosterone levels will, directly, have an effect on performance, as in strength, endurance, power, those kinds of things. And those are the kinds of things obviously required, for performance in sport. So, women don't have that much testosterone as men do, and so they're obviously disadvantaged when it comes to sport involving, strength and etc. But when it comes to sport involving skills, there's nothing to say that women can't compete with men. I certainly see that all the time. I work with both male and female athletes, and in the strength-driven sports, the males, by far outstretch their female counterparts. But in a nutshell, yes, reducing testosterone levels will have a direct effect on decreasing strength levels, ability to train at high sort of intensities for longer periods. In other words, endurance will also be affected.
Because my understanding is that men produce 570% more testosterone than women do. And this leads to major differences between the sexes in muscle complexion, bone thickness, skeletal muscle mass, and red blood cell count. So when you lower your testosterone, if you've gone through puberty as a male, and then after that, lower your testosterone, will that affect your ability to build muscle? And what about the bone density and red blood cell count? Does that aid performance to the extent where we can say this is unfair, or it seems unfair, or it's most likely that the transgender athlete is going to outperform the biological female, or the females born biologically female?
Yeah, look, I think the transgender athlete is obviously going to be at some kind of disadvantage initially, because the organizations are more and more now putting out policies that involve stipulating exact concentrations of testosterone that can legally be found in their in their bodies for them to be able to perform at those levels. Um, um, it doesn't say that females don't have any testosterone. It's just saying that we're trying to reduce or contain the concentrations that transgender athletes will have, especially if they're transitioning from, male to female. I don't necessarily think that there'll be, massive differences in how women will be seen in terms of, as I said, sports involving more skills. But I think there will definitely be an effect when it comes to, let's say bodybuilding, for instance, or where it's very specific, what males and females can do. I mean, it's a bad example, but it's a good example as well, because it's probably the clearest example of how the difference in strength, as you say, you talked about bone density, you talked about muscle definition, etc., muscle bulk, etc. And those are things that are, requisites for that kind of sport. So therefore, female athletes will be at a disadvantage to compared to transgender athletes.
Yes, because you speak about weightlifting, and Laura Hubbard she will be competing at the Olympics, but she was, or rather is, a New Zealand powerlifter who used to compete what people describe as poorly in the men's division, but she took first place at the Pacific Games, beating the female Commonwealth Games champion in both categories. And she's also, I think, 43 years old. So she will also be the oldest female to be competing in that weightlifting division. So the argument is, would she have been able to she probably wouldn't have been able to compete as a biological male in terms of performance, but now she is outperforming the females. And I think that that is where the debate comes in, where people are saying that this is unfair because she may break records that women have held for years. But you know what? She's also identifying as a woman. So we can't really exclude her. It's about inclusivity. It's a very, very uh, difficult conversation to have, and also a difficult debate. And there have been others like Piers Morgan who have spoken out harshly against transgender athletes actually competing in international sports. So I think in weightlifting, but you know what, World Athletics is allowing it. But you did mention now lifting. It's that muscle. But do you think that her being 43 years old, though, you think that kind of maybe equalizes the chances?
Look, right. So yes, look, obviously age is a leveler. I mean, we see that all the time, even in like sex athletes, whether it's male or female athletes. We see issues where younger guys by far can surpass the attributes and the achievements of older athletes. And I mean, a case in point is now Roger Federer just got knocked out of the Wimbledon Championships in quarterfinal. I mean, the guy's turning 40 at the moment, got beaten by maybe a lesser player, but a lot younger, and is a lot maybe better suited to playing the modern game. So yes, I think it will be a leveler, a higher age. You're quite right. It's a very tricky subject to sort of, start drawing conclusions from, because I think the policies that control, the inclusion of transgender athletes are so young. I mean, it was only in 2019 when Cricket Australia, for instance, brought about a transgender policy. We don't even have something in South Africa. And I think Cricket Australia took their lead from the International Cricket Council, which in turn took their lead from the International Olympic Committee. And so, look, it's new ground that's being broken. So there isn't really, how can I say, clear guidelines as such. And I think, if I remember correctly, Cricket Australia have said that they will revisit on an annual basis what their policy is doing, to try and sort of see if they can be adjusting and amending it in accordance with the requirements and what obstacles they encumber on this road. So it's very tough to sort of draw hard and fast comparisons and say, on the face of it, you'd say automatically that transgender athletes will definitely be having an advantage over just normal female athletes, based on where they've come from. I think the first step is in trying to control, as you've pointed out, that level of testosterone concentration in their bodies. And so if you can set a benchmark there, and who knows what that benchmark is, I think you mentioned 5 nanomoles per liter.
Yes.
Now, where does that come from? I mean, there isn't a hard and fast rule about that. There isn't pure scientific evidence that says if someone's got less than that testosterone in the body, they're going to be say more female than they are males, because you must remember they come from a birth sex that has been predominantly male, and they've had testosterone produced for their entire lives until that point. So they've got the benefits of having that testosterone in their bodies for such a long period, and obviously they've developed accordingly. If you suddenly now decrease their testosterone, then yes, they won't continue to produce that muscle bulk, etc. But who's to say they're going to lose all those attributes they had as a male athlete?
Yes, because I do not know a lot about muscle composition and the body in that sense, not something that I studied. But what I have read and what has been brought into the debate is that men produce more type 2 muscle fibers, which is fast twitch muscles, than they do type 1 muscle fibers, slow twitch, which gives men more power than women and helps make men stronger and faster. And you treat a lot of cricketers. How would you say this would affect, batting or bowling?
Okay, so You're absolutely right. I mean, I've worked in cricket for over 20 years now, and I see both male and female cricketers, in fact. And I work sometimes with our Protea ladies who are based down here in Cape Town as well, and I've worked with some of the Western Province ladies as well. Look, without a doubt, the muscle tone is different. I mean, in the male cricketers, they've got bigger muscles, they've got better toned muscles, they've got better definition. Cricket, fortunately, I think, is one of those games exactly where you can also have overweight cricketers. I've come across a lot of overweight cricketers as well, where it's not an absolute prerequisite that you be in pristine condition in terms of your body. I think because there's a certain amount of skill involved, female cricketers will be able to compete with male cricketers. But as you say, let's say it comes to maybe the more explosive part of the game, T20 cricket, where it's not just about good technique, it's actually about being explosive. I think the ladies will come a little bit shorter from what I've seen, and the female cricket that I've watched, and that's just a direct result of having muscles that are not quite as strong, and so therefore they're not quite as powerful. Who knows if female cricketers went on a program of strength work and explosive training to be able to enhance all of those attributes to bring them closer to males, they might compete a little bit better. But just taking everyone on the same level, I don't think that females will be able to compete with males, especially in the shorter version of the game when it comes to being explosive, and strength is a key requisite.
Because elite athletes that play internationally, whether it's cricket or any other sport, they're on the international sport, they are there because they are elite and they are putting in the hard work. So now these differences, I'm just trying to understand. So I know that people say that Michael Phelps, his arms were very long, so he had an advantage when he was swimming. There are other athletes, like when you're taller and you're doing long jump, you have the advantage. Can we equate it to being similar to something like that? There's always going to be somebody who has the advantage. I mean, when I'm grappling or wrestling, there will be others who are far more athletic and muscular than I am, and they do have that advantage, and then I have to be more technical. Not to say that I can't win, I just have to be more technical. So can we kind of equate those differences? Can we say that it's similar in that sense, or can we not compare it in that way?
To a degree, yes, it is similar. I mean, good technique is always going to be competitive in even a strength-based environment. However, let's look at rugby, for instance, where, the players are absolutely, they're beasts, they as strong as they can be. And strength doesn't necessarily equal stature in terms of the biggest guys on the field aren't necessarily the strongest guys. And you have to, take that into account. Likewise, if you were to make that analogy and you said that, let's say female rugby players, if they were big, would they have the same strength as their male counterparts? I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. But even for male players, a big physique doesn't equal the strongest guy on the field. However, with bigger players or bigger physiques, they will have an advantage when it comes to, when they're sitting down in a scrum, for instance, whether they've got good technique or not. As long as they're big, you can't push a big guy over as you can push, someone who's a little bit smaller. It'd be easier to push them over. So, yes, physique and stature and size will matter. People who have got a disadvantage because they're smaller will have to work harder on, as you said, technique, but they can be stronger. So, you can make the comparison and say, well, hang on, you can get a small player competing against a bigger player. I mean, another example is tennis. You've got tennis players who are, massive and strong, and the game's becoming, quick and explosive, and they're hitting the balls harder. But you also have very petite female players playing fantastic tennis and are very competitive against the bigger players. And it just shows you, there's room for competition when you can improve on all the other areas. It doesn't involve size, bulk, and so forth.
So, Lisha, you play cricket and you have a few stories about female cricketers who have actually played in male teams and against males.
Yeah. This is interesting, eh? um, and I just want to say there's such a fine line between these things, find the disadvantages and advantages. But anyway, so a few years ago, I think 2014, um, our favorites, Marizan Cup and Danai van Niekerk, played in the EP Men's Academy team, and they did pretty well. And it was just like it was just an idea from the managing side where they just wanted to see how they would perform against the men, and they did actually pretty well. And another story is one of my club teammates, Lauren Boyston. I don't know if you heard of her, but in 2016 she also made the SA emerging squad. But when she plays club, she not only plays for the women's team but also for the senior men. And she blasts those boys, eh? Like, like she bounces their heads off, and it's so nice to watch because when I saw her first play for the men's team, it was my first game scoring club, and they didn't have any answers for balls, and like she opened the bowling, so I was like, you know, if she can perform at that level, then I don't feel like there's like, how can I put this? Like I feel like we should just play where we feel comfortable and where we can excel, you know. Um, they did it in the men's team. I don't know if it'll be a step up for Kakis Rabada or but I definitely feel like for a female playing in a male team, it definitely opens the opportunity to up your game.
And it's interesting because that shows that in cricket specifically as a sport, it's possible for the women to compete against men. But it's also with the women's game, there are differences. Like when women play test cricket, they only play it for 4 days and not 5. The size of the pitch is different. Talk a bit about that, Lisha, those differences and why you feel like it's needed.
Um, yeah, so it's not just that. The balls that we play with is also a different size. Like the men play with a 156-gram ball, and then we play with a 142. Um, our boundary lines is much smaller because, like Shane said, it comes from the strength that we have in comparison to the strength that men have. Sometimes we can't even hit sixes. We go matches without hitting sixes because if the boundary line is too big. Um, but that again also comes with the science behind our bodies compared to men. Um, I think I don't want to say it's necessary to have lighter balls or smaller boundaries, etc. Because I'm a firm believer of like if you work hard, you can do anything, you know. But when you look at, like you said, we play only 4 days when we play test matches. Sometimes it doesn't even last the duration because we don't necessarily have the strength and the endurance to be able to see through the longer formats. But yeah, I feel like the shorter boundaries and the shorter formats for now is better suited. But I mean, like Shane said, if we are put in the same strength and conditioning program as men, there could be a big possibility that we can endure 5 days of cricket and be more explosive in the shorter formats as well.
And twins, do you have anything to add to that or any questions? Maybe a question for Shane.
Actually, yes, I do. Thank you so much for giving us some insight and things. But I just want to know, like, currently, how do you think the media is playing a role or plays a role in informing us, or even just depicting individuals, transgender or LGBTQ individuals. I just want to know, like, in your opinion, how do you think the media has been doing in that role?
Yeah, look, I mean, in my experience, I think the media, it's a young topic, and I think it's a young area. And, you know, I think we don't know the way forward. I think there must be a commitment maybe to, to include people who have sort of an affirmed gender identity, in all games and all sports for that matter. And I suppose it's about inclusivity. How much of that is actually happening and in the media will be based possibly by how it's fed through the different sporting organizations. Cricket, Cricket Australia leads the way a little bit when it comes to these kinds of things, and they never, sort of wait to see what the rest of the world's doing. I mean, they're one of the forefront, sporting cricket sporting countries, and so they've taken the lead. I mean, like in South Africa, we don't have any policy. There is no policy. I mean, I don't think we've kind of even given it any thought. I think we've got our own sort of issues in cricket at the moment in South Africa, but that's for another time. I think what they have importantly said is that every year they will revisit their policy, and that for me is an important thing, because I think if they start becoming aware of not just cricket but other sports, athletes starting to perform in that sort of transgender transition, or whether they've already arrived at the place that they've their goal they've moved to, if it's a male to female transition, the more that happens, the more it's going to become a talking topic. And certainly what Tara's doing here now is would be a very good way of sort of highlighting the topic, and so that might shed a little bit of light and cast a few sort of questions around the media world, and so people start addressing it. I certainly haven't seen it at all. I was quite excited when she mentioned it to me, because it's not something that's around. I like to think that cricket, especially, it's a game that I've been close to, is open to everybody, not just male and female, and why not? Because exactly for the reasons that I think it's one of those games where skill will easily be able to match up across the different genders, I think, at least. But I suppose in answering your question, I haven't really done that well. I think my honest opinion is I don't know what our media is doing. Tara is the first person I think that I've seen now address this, and who's come to me with it. No one's ever asked me a question around it, even though I've worked in cricket for over 20 years.
I will add that when talking about the LGBTQI plus community, that is spoken about. Yes, we do see it on social media. We do, there are pride marches. We do have festivals. That is happening. But specifically when talking about transgender athletes, it's not just about talking about the including them, the inclusivity. It's also a conversation around fairness. And people are very, very afraid to speak out in the media about whether they feel it is fair or unfair, because they don't want to be seen as saying, no, we shouldn't include an entire group of people, because then it becomes discriminatory. So I think that a lot of people are afraid. I spoke to a few people before this podcast, and everyone was afraid about speaking about this topic. Everyone, the fear, even doctors, because I was just asking a little bit about the science around it. They were afraid. They were like, I do not want to answer the question. Like, I'm not sure how I should answer the question. So even doctors are afraid to really speak out on the topic. And then you do get other media houses overseas that have been very vocal about it. But here in South Africa in particular, it's not really something that is being spoken about. But I did want us to talk about it because, like Shane said, Cricket Australia has introduced a policy. They are working on a policy to include transgender athletes into the game to help them. I actually think I have a copy of that policy. And I know that they said that the policy is aimed at providing pathways for transgender people to play cricket under the gender they identify as, with an expert panel created to oversee this journey to an elite level, so that transgender athletes and cricketers in particular can play at an elite level. And in England, they have had a transgender cricketer. They have playing county cricket, I think, for Kent. So they have had that. But her situation was quite unique in that she had a condition where she couldn't really go through puberty as a male. So her testosterone levels didn't actually develop as a regular biological males would. So in England media, they have also addressed it, especially with regards to cricket. I'm not sure about their policies, but they are allowing transgender cricketers to play for their teams and their clubs. I hope that answers your question, twins. Or yeah.
Yeah, it does. No, thank you very much. But I also just wanted to add something on what Lisha said or about Danae van die Kerk and Marizaan. A lot of the cricketers that we interviewed said that they started out playing in boys' teams at school because there wasn't obviously a girls' team. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because it's actually quite common that they would start in the boys' team before they, get into a women's team or club level or provincial. Yeah, it's quite an observation that we made. Yeah.
Yes, especially in our country, in some parts of the country, there are only male teams, or there aren't enough females who are interested in cricket or interested in pursuing a career in cricket. We're now seeing, female cricketers emerging, and we watching our female Proteas, going out winning, and that's probably inspiring more girls to look at cricket as an option. But a lot of these cricketers, especially older cricketers, when they started out, they had to play with the boys. So maybe it's a lot also about nature versus nurture. I'm not sure if that plays a role in it, but I feel like sometimes it does, or it could, if women were pushed harder or forced to perform at a certain level against men, they may surprise us. Do you have anything more to add, twins, or any more questions?
I think also just
yeah.
coming from like a fan's perspective, like, we always have a lot of our role models in the team. And then some of us, I'm just speaking in general, will have very conservative views about these kind of things, men transitioning to women or women transitioning to men. And, it is quite a touchy subject, and I think it is quite sensitive as well. So I think the reason why we also are a little afraid to engage in these kind of discussions is because we're not really sure, what do you say? Do you just say, yeah, it's really okay. But now look, all these other issues that will arise. And then you can also just be like, but just shove it on the side and don't talk about it. But at the end of the day, it's still people, that have to function as regular human beings in society.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just trying to get that narrative going, get that dialogues between people who are slightly more conservative with those who are slightly more well versed in the subject of it. So yeah, I think we need to just bring that a bit more out in the open, without prejudice, obviously. And if people still remain conservative about their views, that also not to hold that against them. But yeah, it's quite an interesting topic. So yeah, that's why we are just to give a listen. Thank you.
There are more and more transgender athletes, coming out and wanting to compete. So this is a very important discussion because, like I said, with Laurel Hubbard now, for the first time, a transgender athlete will be taking part in the Olympics. That does open the door, for other athletes and also countries to revisit their policies. I know that America, in a lot of their states have policies against transgender athletes competing, even at school level. So that is definitely a reality. Shane, I'm not sure about if you can explain this thing about having more hemoglobin. So apparently men that have grown up male, they have more hemoglobin. So how would this really affect? I know that hemoglobin transports oxygen in the body, but how does that in particular affect performance?
You know, it goes hand in hand again with why do you need oxygen, and and what's the role that hemoglobin's playing. Men have got bigger muscles; they've got more muscles than women have, and so they need more oxygen to make these muscles function. And if you looked at total body mass and you looked at total muscle mass from males to females, it's very different. The distribution is very different. So the ratios are, a lot higher for men. And for instance, we also, all of us, males and females, we've got, I'm going to call it a rude word, fat deposits around our body. But it's true, it's real. And that's hormonally driven, and that's hormonally sort of regulated. So men have got hormones that dictate, certain amounts of fat and certain positions of fat around their body. And women have got a totally different distribution. So when you're talking about, elevated hemoglobin levels and increased oxygenation, it's required for male bodies to be functional because they've got bigger muscles and they've got a bigger muscle mass. And in total, all the muscles around their bodies, if you added it all up, by far would outstrip, specifically petite women who don't necessarily expose themselves to, intense physical activity and don't have the muscle mass. A woman who doesn't expose herself to intense physical activity, their hormonal levels will sort of take over, and that will sort of dictate that their fat deposits are sort of more distributed in their body as opposed to the muscle mass. And so that's a tricky subject there. Women who are very active, their hormones will sort of take a slight backseat because they'll have a higher muscle mass and bigger muscles and so on. So, you talked about nature nurture earlier, and that's a direct sort of important, concept to consider, because if you push women to exercise and to work at levels that, men are working at, from young ages, young boys at school already, they might also have, developed these physical attributes that will give, young male adolescent boys to the opportunity to perform at such high levels at such tender ages. Now, it's kind of frowned on for women and for girls at school, for instance. Don't train as hard. You don't play so hard. You don't play the kind of sports. I mean, what female learner gets to play rugby, and that sort of thing. Football, even at school. Now it's coming into effect more and more now that young girls are being exposed to, sport like football. There is rugby being played, but rugby gets played for females at a very sort of later stage of their lives. They don't get to play, rugby in primary school and that sort of thing. So, I suppose this hemoglobin thing is just, men need it more. So they have got higher hemoglobin levels and therefore better oxygenation across their bodies. And that's driven to a degree by testosterone levels again, which females don't have such a lot of. So, yeah.
Okay, so it actually all comes down to testosterone levels.
Absolutely.
I was wondering because I thought maybe it's a separate thing entirely, and that's now an added advantage. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense. If you do have more oxygen, though, so it's probably more likely that you'll be able to endure a lot for a lot longer. Gassing out.
Yeah, your muscle endurance is better. Your muscle, metabolic sort of system is better fed. I mean, let's be honest here. Take away the glucose that's required, in your blood and in your tissue levels, your glycogen, the way it's stored, to be present for endurance. You need oxygen, and you need a constant supply of oxygen. So now you're almost touching onto a slightly different subject as well: cardiovascular fitness. Do men have better cardiovascular ability than females do? If you want to measure
Yes.
that, you'd have to, do specific studies that involves taking a VO2 max, which is the maximum oxygen concentration that, is in a person's or available to a person in their body when they're exercising. Now, yes, studies have been done to do that. Men do have, by and large, significantly higher VO2 maxes than women. However, women who train, they can acquire a better VO2 max. That gives an indication of their ability to perform. So your cardiovascular fitness is an indication of your body's ability to sort of to bring oxygen and fuel to the active muscle areas. It's not just your ability to say have respiratory endurance, and that's why it's called cardiovascular. It's the transport of oxygen and nutrients by your body in general. And so if you've got a better cardiovascular ability, you're obviously going to have a better ability to to provide oxygen, and hence hemoglobin in your red blood cells to active parts of your body. So men have got a clear advantage there. If they are able to train better, they've got better testosterone levels, they can train better, so they can perform better. And so that's where, there's a snag that you got to go backwards a little bit as well. Women don't train as hard as men do. I mean, traditionally, but that's not that doesn't have to be the norm. That can change. And as the ladies have said early on, if you start exposing women to better training regimes and better training protocols, they can, aspire to, better competitive levels to their male counterparts.
That's very
Would she be
interesting.
able to-
So if you were to reduce testosterone, that's not really going to affect your body's your VO2 max, really.
No, it shouldn't. It's a training effect. Look, there are
Okay.
cases where people have got a genetic predisposition and they're genetically gifted and they're talented. I mean, you look at the North African runners. There's been studies done on their ability to be able to run and perform better. And that's genetics. There's nothing you can do about it. There's some people who can run better than others. And it doesn't matter how hard you train. But you can improve your VO2 max with training. And so, that's the reality that's available to female athletes and elite female athletes out there.
Twins, I think you wanted to add something.
Actually, I wanted to pose a bit of a scenario. Let's say, for instance, you have a woman cricket player transitioning into male or to male, and let's say joins the men's cricket team, like the national cricket team, and how would such an individual cope against fast bowlers like Kagiso Rabada, Andries Nokia, at such speeds, like.
So when you're transitioning that way from female to male, then obviously there isn't a limit on your testosterone levels. I mean, and even within the male population, you've got very different levels of testosterone levels, and some males are more male than others, if you want to call it that. And you get sporty males and you get non-sporty males, and that's the way it is. I mean, it's true though. But there you've got no restrictions. The shackles are off. You can go from female to male, and they don't care how much testosterone you've got. In fact, the more you've got, the more male you are, and the better you're going to perform. I will say, though, as I've said before, that it depends on what stage of your life you're transitioning. So let's say as a female, you've always had suppressed testosterone levels, and you haven't had all those sort of physical driving forces that we've just been speaking about. So you haven't been exposed to all the physicality that a male boy and a male adolescent has been exposed to. And so you don't have the benefit of those adaptations that have occurred over, say, a period of, let's say you're doing it at age 18. So for that 18 years, you haven't had the benefit of that. So as a female transitioning towards male, you'll be at a disadvantage, I think, anyway. So, to answer your question, I think you're going to have to train bloody hard, and you're going to have to really work on your technique and your skill to go and face Kagiso Rabada, because, he comes from a very male sort of perspective. He's been exposed to all those physical sort of, activities as a male, and he's developed as a male, and he's exploited his talents and his gifts as a male. to
And he
get
doesn't
to
have
the
any
level
of
he's
that
at.
fatty tissue.
Nothing. There's nothing going there. You know, his hormones are subdued. I think when he stops playing cricket, maybe, you know, you might see a hint of his hormones playing a little bit of part in depositing his fat distribution around his body. But at the moment, not. I hope not, for our sake.
I hope so.
Do you have anything more, Leisha, that you want to ask or add?
No. I don't want to ask anything. I just want to say I wish that I had better fat deposits so I can see my abs. I've been working so hard, but it's just not coming through for me. But yeah, it's been so interesting. I just want to thank Shane for his views and insights. That's really something that needs to be spoken more about because in the past it was frowned upon and shoved under the rug, but now there's more and more athletes coming through, and I feel like it's important for them also to have a voice, and someone backing that up.
And hopefully someday soon we'll hear Cricket South Africa also talking about this, creating policy, allowing the space for inclusivity in this regard, or at least have the discussion. I think everything starts with the discussion, and sometimes it takes really long for policy to go through in our country with regards to anything. But particularly in sport, we want to see the sport grow, and we want all athletes to have an opportunity. And it's been very insightful having this conversation. Absolutely amazing. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we wrap this up, Shane?
No, it's just thanks for the opportunity. I mean, I didn't shy away from it when you asked me. I think I didn't know where you were coming from when you asked. I thought that you possibly wanted me to treat someone who, who was in a transgender sort of position, and certainly I wouldn't be afraid to do that at all either. I mean, like I said to you, I think in my response when you first said to me, I said, I don't see why not. I think I have, but so thanks for the opportunity, and it's been an eye opener for me as well. It's great to see that people are talking about it, and maybe as the twins have said as well, in the media, it needs to be something that is kind of sort of put on a, how can I say, on a higher sort of level of awareness, without a doubt. And maybe even, these doctors that you're talking to, you might be talking to the wrong doctor. Speak to some other doctors who are willing to talk about it, because I'm sure there are guys who are more knowledgeable than I am, who can talk on the subject. And, without a doubt, I speak from experience but, and my experiences have been far and few between. And I'm sure there are doctors, maybe the doctors who are dealing with transgender sort of issues and treatments, would be, a good opportunity to sort of get their views as well, and sort of, share what we're trying to highlight here.
And on that note, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Shane, for coming on and speaking about it and answering all of our questions. It has been something that professionals have been shying away from, or actually wanting to talk about it, where others can actually hear their answers. And hopefully that will change as we get to talking about it more and more. Remember to like, subscribe, click that notification bell. Links in the bio to becoming a patron. Be lekker, be safe. And of course, leave your comments in the comment section if you'd like us to do a follow-up on this topic, another show about transgender athletes, particularly in the world of cricket. Then do let us know in that comment section. We'll definitely be considering it and hopefully bring some more people on board who can answer all of those questions. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful evening. Stay safe.